Here's a thing I think about more than I probably should. Regular Show is a program about two blokes who do not want to do their jobs. That's it. That's the entire pitch. A blue jay and a raccoon are employed to rake leaves and mow grass at a park, and they spend the better part of a decade finding increasingly elaborate ways to not rake leaves and not mow grass. The pilot is literally the two of them playing rock, paper, scissors to decide who has to sit on the uncomfortable sofa. That's the level we're starting at, and it ends with one of them watching his friend hug his own brother into the sun to stop the heat death of reality. I've never fully got over that gap, not because it doesn't work, because it absolutely does, but because nothing in the first few episodes suggests it's coming. You watch season 1 and it's just two lads arguing about a video game while a giant hot dog tries to kill them. There's no seeding. There's no ominous shot of a lollipop looking wistfully at the stars. It's just a slacker comedy that, over about 6 years, quietly turned into a story about destiny and sacrifice and the specific tragedy of being someone's created opposite, and somehow never lost the bit where a green man in a vest shouts about his mum. So that's what tonight is. 20-odd what-ifs, 20-odd little hinges in the Regular Show universe, where you can see exactly where the thing would have swung the other way if one small choice had gone differently. I want to be upfront about the format, though, because I think it matters. These aren't in any particular order. Nothing builds. There's no big one at the end that I'm saving up for, and there's no twist I'm dangling in front of you to keep you awake. Each one is just its own little pocket. If you drift off during the skips one and wake up somewhere in the middle of Muscle Man, you haven't missed anything load-bearing. That's on purpose. You're meant to be falling asleep, and I'm not going to be one of those people going, but wait until you hear number 4 at 1:30 in the morning. That would be rude. The show ran for 8 seasons and 244 episodes from 2010 to 2017, plus a film in the middle of it that turns out to matter enormously. So there's a lot of material to poke at. Some of these what-ifs are cosmic, the kind where the universe stops existing. Some of them are about whether a ghost would have moved to Prague. Both get roughly the same amount of my attention, which I think is the correct way to treat this show. If you do end up enjoying this, and you're still conscious in an hour, subscribing helps. That's my whole pitch. Right, let's get into it. A single sheet of paper. That's the load-bearing beam of this entire show. Not the park, not the magic keyboard, not the immortal Yeti. One sheet of A4 with the wrong words printed on it, and everything else is built on top of that. So the setup is this. Mordecai and Rigby are in high school. They both apply to a place called College University, which is their dream, and which is also a running joke because the name is so lazy it loops back around to being funny. Mordecai gets in, Rigby does not. And Rigby, faced with the prospect of his best mate driving off to university without him, sits down and forges a rejection letter for Mordecai. He fakes it. He makes his friend believe the door closed on him when it hadn't. And then the two of them, with nowhere else to go, end up answering a newspaper advert for 2 groundskeepers at a park. I still find that genuinely startling as a plot point. Not shocking, startling. There's a difference. Shocking is a twist. Startling is when a show you've been watching for years quietly informs you that the reason you have a show at all is that one of your protagonists did something quite cruel to the other one when he was 18 and never mentioned it. Now, we don't learn this in an episode. We learn it in the film, which came out in 2015 and is properly canon, and which is one of the strangest things Cartoon Network ever put on air, because it's a slacker comedy that opens in a war-torn future where everyone you love is being executed. Future Rigby is leading a rebellion. Future Mordecai has a robot arm and works for the villain. The villain, incidentally, is their old science teacher, who also coached volleyball, and whose entire motivation for erasing all of time is that Rigby cost him a state championship. Mr. Ross, voiced by Jason Mantzoukas, which is exactly the correct casting decision, and I won't hear otherwise. And the way the rejection letter comes out is brutal. Ross has Mordecai hostage. He makes Rigby say it out loud. In front of him, decades of friendship just sitting there, while Rigby explains that, no, actually, you did get in, I did this to you. I had to, you would have gone off to college without me. Mordecai's response is to end the friendship, on the spot. Not a strop, not a we need some space. He just cuts it off and tells Rigby he held him back his entire life. And the horrible part is that he's not wrong. That's the thing. Rigby doesn't have a defense here. He has an explanation, which is a completely different object. So, what if he doesn't do it? What if 18-year-old Rigby gets his own rejection, feels awful about it for a week, and then just tells his mate congratulations? Mordecai goes to college university. He's the one who's good at art, remember? And by the end of the series, that's what he ends up doing anyway. So give him 4 years and a degree, and he probably gets there a decade earlier, and with considerably less grass stain on him. He'd have made friends. He'd have had a completely ordinary early 20s, which is a phrase that sounds like nothing but is actually enormous when you consider the alternative involved him being erased from existence by a cosmic lollipop, and Rigby stays home. Rigby, with no diploma at that point, no plan, and no Mordecai, which is the version of the timeline he was so terrified of that he committed like forgery to avoid it. And it's also the version that would probably have forced him to grow up about 10 years earlier than he did. But here's what actually stops me. Neither of them ever goes to that park. The advert goes unanswered, or someone else answers it. Benson hires 2 competent people who do the job, and his blood pressure improves, and he possibly makes it as a drummer, which we'll get to later. Pops carries on being a delightful man, with no idea what he is. Skips keeps skipping. Muscle Man keeps saying, "my mum," to nobody in particular. The park just quietly exists as a park. And then, eventually, Auntie Pops arrives. That's the bit. The entire cosmic plot of this show only gets resolved because 2 specific idiots happened to be standing next to Pops when it mattered. The park crew only exists because of a small, selfish, human decision made by a scared teenager. Take away the letter, and you take away the crew, and take away the crew, and there's nobody there when the universe needs somebody there. I find that lovely, honestly. Not in a tidy, everything happens for a reason way, because that's rubbish and this show would never say it. More in the sense that the thing that saved everything was a genuinely bad decision. Rigby did something wrong. It was wrong when he did it, and it was still wrong when it came out. And it's also the only reason anyone's alive. The show never resolves that tension because you can't resolve it. It just lets it sit there. Here's a fun detail that I think about a lot. College University is described in the film as the college for everyone. That's the branding. The requirements are functionally non-existent. It is the least selective institution ever depicted in animation, and it rejected Rigby. Even Benson, who has spent years openly telling Rigby he's a lazy waste of a wage, visibly winces when he hears that letter read out. That's how bad it is. The man who once threatened to fire him for existing looks at that piece of paper and feels sorry for him. That's a great little bit of writing, that, because it does more character work in one facial expression than a whole monologue would. I do want to defend Rigby here a bit, not the action. The action's indefensible. But the feeling underneath it is the single most 23 thing in the entire programme. Because that's the actual fear, isn't it? Not that your friend will stop liking you, that your friend will simply move, geographically, into a life you're not part of, and it won't even be personal. He won't have chosen to leave you, he'll just have gone. And by the time you both notice, you'll be 2 people who used to know each other really well, sending each other birthday messages once a year, and meaning them less every time. Rigby saw that coming, and he panicked and he did the stupidest possible thing about it, which is, I think extremely realistic behaviour for a teenager who has never once in his life managed to sit with an uncomfortable feeling for longer than 4 seconds. And the film's resolution is quietly perfect about this. They fix it by going back and getting past Rigby to apologise to past Mr. Ross, which is all Ross ever wanted from the start. That's it. That's the entire cosmic threat neutralised. Not a weapon, not a chosen one, just a teenager saying sorry to a PA teacher. The two of them then make a promise to each other in the present that they won't let their friendship rot into the thing where they try to kill each other, and that promise erases both their future selves out of the timeline. Which means that somewhere in a version of reality that no longer exists, there's a Rigby who died in a rebellion and a Mordecai who shot him. And the reason they don't exist anymore is that 2 blokes in their 20s had one honest conversation on a driveway. You don't need the whole thing about destiny. You just need that. His name is Skips because he skips. That's the joke. For about 4 seasons, that is the entire joke. The big immortal yeti who can lift a car and knows how to defeat every monster that wanders into the park does not move around exclusively by skipping, like a child on the way to a birthday party. And other characters do comment on it, because in this show, that barely registers as odd. And then season 5 happens and the joke stops being a joke. His name was Walks. That's who he was before. A young bloke, cocky, good with his hands, chucked out of several schools for fighting, turning up at yet another one, and telling the headmaster to his face that school is worthless for an adventurer like him. Which is such a specific flavour of teenage arrogance that I laughed out loud the first time. He's insufferable. He's brilliant. The episode is called Skip's Story, and it takes place in a setting that I can only describe as vaguely 18th century, possibly 19th, and also somehow a 1980s American high school. There are lockers, there are photographs being developed, there's a headmaster who looks and sounds almost exactly like Benson, with a beard, which the show never explains and clearly finds funny. The whole thing is a fever dream, and it's one of the best episodes they ever made. So Walks turns up. He meets a bloke called Gareth, who you and I know as Gary, and Gareth introduces him to the Immortal Student Council, who you and I know as the Guardians of Eternal Youth. Enormous babies, deep voices, big rattles, absolutely no explanation offered. And then Clogbane walks in. Clogbane the Destroyer, who is their brother, who wanted to join them and was refused because of the way he went about getting control of the school, and who now simply owns the place. He hits Reginald in front of everyone. He shoves Walks, and Walks, being Walks, squares up immediately and would have gone for him right there if the headmaster hadn't broken it up. Then at lunch, Walks can't find anywhere to sit, and a girl asks him if he'd like to sit with her. Her name is Mona, and this is where the episode stops being fun. They get on. Of course they get on. And the Guardians come to Walks and say, listen, no mortal can hurt Clogbane, but we've made these. And they show him the fists of justice. Gauntlets, immortal ones, powerful enough to actually land a blow on him. And Walks is thrilled. He's a fighter. This is exactly his kind of afternoon. And then he turns around and Mona's gone. He goes after her and she tells him plainly that she doesn't like blokes who fight. So he promises them that he'll fight Clark Bain whenever he returns. I want to sit on that for a second, because it's such a small line, and it does so much. That's a lad who has been expelled from multiple schools for fighting, who has just been granted eternal youth by the Guardians, who is being asked by Mona not to fight Clark Bain, and he looks at a girl he met at lunch and says fine. Done. Never again. And then Clark Bain does what bullies do, and Walks breaks the promise. And Mona never gives him her blessing to break it because she dies before she can see what Clogbane actually is. The fight goes badly. Walks hits him over and over, and it does nothing, because of course it does nothing. He's immortal, and he was told this. Clogbane hits him once and puts him across the room. Then he takes out his rattle to finish it, and Mona shoves Walks out of the way, and Clogbane misses, and the swing brings down a chunk of the ceiling. On her, Gareth throws Walks the fists. Walks puts them on and hits Clogbane so hard he goes into the stratosphere. And then he goes to Mona, and there's nothing there to save, and all the Guardians can do is hand him back the necklace he gave her. Moments later, they come to him and offer him immortality. Not as a gift, as a job, because they've done the maths and Clogbane's orbit brings him back in 157 years, and somebody has to be alive to meet him. And he takes it. Obviously, he takes it. He's got nothing left to lose by living forever, which is a horrible sentence and is exactly the point. So, what if he keeps the promise? Walks sees Clogbane hit Reginald, and he does nothing. He sits there. He goes back to his lunch. He marries Mona, presumably, and has an entirely ordinary 19th century life, and dies at some entirely ordinary 19th century age, and there is no skips. Which means 157 years later, nobody meets Clogbane. And more importantly, about a century after that, there's no one in the park who knows what to do when things go wrong. Because that's Skips' actual function, isn't it? Not strength, information. He's the bloke who says, "I've seen this before," and then tells you the answer. Take him out, and the park crew die in roughly episode 9 to a hot dog. But that's not really the interesting bit. The interesting bit is what it costs him to be that guy. Because immortality in this show is not a reward. It's the consolation prize. It's what they give you when the thing you actually wanted is under a ceiling. The Guardians didn't make him immortal because he was heroic. They made him immortal because he was available and grief-stricken and had no reason left to say no. He is functionally a very long-serving employee who took a job on the worst day of his life and never got round to quitting. There's a bit in the framing story where Mordecai and Rigby are winding him up about immortality, doing the obvious stuff, imagine all the things you could do, imagine never dying. And Skips tells them quite flatly that they've got the whole thing wrong. And then he tells them the story, and at the end of it Mordecai has to physically lead Rigby out of the room to give the man some privacy. Here's the fun detail. The song playing over the dance scene between Walks and Mona is Forever Young by Alphaville, which came out in 1984. In a scene set in, generously, the 1850s. The show does not care at all. It has no interest in whether that makes sense because the emotional register of that song is correct and the historical register is irrelevant. And honestly, it's right. This is a program that exists in a permanent, eternal 1980s, regardless of what the calendar says. And once you accept that, the anachronism isn't a mistake. It's the house style. Now, the one thing I'll push back on, the Guardians. They're presented as these vast cosmic beings, and everyone treats them that way, and Skips has to do a ceremonial dance for them every birthday to keep his immortality, or they take it back and turn him to ash, which they genuinely start doing once when Rigby interrupts it. Very intimidating, very ancient, but watch how they actually behave in that flashback. They're a student council. They've got a bully problem, they've built a weapon, and they're wandering around campus looking for someone angry enough to swing it for them. Reginald actively tells one of the others to hang back and let Walks fight alone. There's a line where Gareth promises Walks something and adds, "After all, we are the student government," which is not the reassurance they think it is. They're not omnipotent guardians of the balance. They're a group of nerds who found a lad with a temper and pointed him at their problem. And then when it went wrong and the girl died, they gave him a job. I'm not saying they're villains. I'm saying they're a committee, which in this show is arguably worse. There's a room on Lollyland called the Hall of Tapestries. It's a hall full of woven fabric, and on the fabric is every version of the same fight. Going back billions of years. Not a museum, not a library, tapestries. Somebody sat there and wove it, and the crew wander in and get shown around by a bloke called Frivolacranus, and another one called Quadravicranus, and genuinely a character credited as Weird Mushroom Guy, who is the funniest thing on that planet. And the tapestries all show the same thing, every single time. Two fists colliding. That's the mechanism. Pops, whose real name out there is Megacranus, is the ultimate creation of the universe. They made versions of themselves for billions of years and never got it quite right, and then they got him. And because you can't have that without a counterweight, their cosmic lineage produced Malum Cranus, his opposite, anti-Pops, made specifically to balance him. And every cycle, the two of them meet in the same Colosseum, on the same two sides, and they hit each other at the same instant. And both of them are destroyed, and the universe resets and starts again. Nobody wins. Nobody has ever won. The guardian of Lollyland tells them this to their faces, and she's not being dramatic about it. She's just reporting. She's never seen the battle end in victory, only mutual destruction followed by a reset. And the only reason anyone knows any of this is that the park is the one place that survives each time to record the outcome. Which is such a bleak little detail. One planet sitting there through the end of everything, taking notes in the tapestries. Benson's response to all this is the correct one. He says, more or less, this has been happening for billions and billions of years. How are we supposed to buck the odds? And he's right. That's not defeatism, that's arithmetic. Mordecai's the one who spots it. He goes and looks at the tapestries properly and notices the thing nobody else has noticed in eternity, which is that the fight always starts in the same place, with Pops on this side and anti-Pops on that side, every time, without variation. Which means you know where he's going to be standing. Which means you can set traps. That's it. That's the great cosmic insight. The universe has been ending on a loop since before time, and the fix is that nobody's ever tried pranking him. Muscle Man's reaction is to immediately volunteer on the grounds that this is like pranking the most evil bloke ever, and to declare that the master prankster is in. Which is, for my money, the single best moment in that entire finale, because it's the show refusing to change register even when the stakes are literally everything. So we know how it actually goes. The traps work briefly, then Anti-Pops goes Titan and starts erasing people, one by one, and the erasure of Muscle Man and Fives is what finally makes Pops go Titan too. And then Anti-Pops erases nearly everyone Pops has ever loved, and boots his brother through a portal, and Pops, having watched all of it, realises the punch is a trap. Because the punch is the loop. The punch is what always happens. Landing the blow is losing. So he hugs him, and it works. The brotherly love cancels out the negative energy, which is a sentence that should be embarrassing and somehow isn't. And for a couple of seconds, Anti-Pops actually reconsiders, and in those couple of seconds, Pops takes them both into the sun. Right, so what if he just wins? What if Pops lands the killing blow, cleanly, no hug, no sacrifice? Anti-Pops is dead, the universe carries on, and Pops walks off Lollyland alive and goes home to the park and to his dad. Everybody lives. On paper, that's the better ending, and I want to take it seriously for a moment rather than just dismissing it, because a lot of people would have preferred it, and I don't think they're mad. Here's my problem with it though. The stalemate is the point. That's the thing the show's actually built around. A draw is what a fight between exact equals produces every single time, forever. And there is no amount of trying harder that gets you out of it. Two things designed to be perfectly matched will match perfectly. That's not tragedy, that's just definitional. The tapestries aren't a curse, they're a spreadsheet. So if Pops wins by punching, the show is saying the answer was that he needed to be stronger. And that's rubbish because he was never going to be stronger. He was made to be exactly as strong. Being stronger was never on the table. The only move available was to stop playing the game entirely, which is the one thing that had never been tried in billions of years because both participants had spent every cycle absolutely certain that hitting the other one was the whole of their purpose. And there's a version of Pops wins that's actually horrible if you follow it through. He goes home. In regular show lore, he's got the universe. He's also killed his brother, who was made specifically to be his brother, who never asked to exist as a counterweight, any more than Pops asked to exist as the good one. Neither of them chose this. They're both just cosmic infrastructure. And now one bit of the infrastructure has murdered the other bit and is expected to go and enjoy a nice afternoon in the park. Pops could not carry that. That's not who he is. This is a man who pays for things with lollipops. The hug is the only ending that doesn't require Pops to stop being Pops. That's why it lands. Here's the fun bit, and this one genuinely delighted me when I found it out. During the fight, Pops gets thrown into a restaurant that's drawn in pencil. Rough, sketchy, completely different style from everything around it. That's not a stylistic flourish. That's the naive man from Lollyland, a short film J.G. Quintel made at CalArts in 2005, 5 years before this show existed. Pops was in it. Same design, near enough, same mannerisms. The character is older than the program he's in. So in the last episode, in the middle of the fight for existence, they throw him back into the student film he was born in. That's not a reference, that's a man putting his character back where he came from before saying goodbye to him. The bit I'll be honest about is the hug itself. It's a swing. It's a proper swing. On paper, he defeats the embodiment of destruction with love is a line I'd normally take the mickey out of relentlessly. And the fact that I'm sat here defending it should tell you how well it's executed. I think it works because they earn it structurally rather than emotionally. They spend the whole episode establishing the mechanism first. Fists colliding, reset, repeat, billions of times. Here's the fabric, here's the record, here's the maths. So by the time Pops does the thing, it doesn't read as sentiment. It reads as the only unexplored branch. He's not being nice at him. He's found the one input nobody has tried. Good hurts evil, sure, but mostly it's just that everything else had been ruled out. Beanbag, ball bucket, beanhead, beanteen, beanton, beanson. That's a running gag that lasts years. Mr. Maillard, who owns the park, cannot be bothered to learn Benson's name, and cycles through increasingly insulting approximations of it. And Benson just takes it, every time, because Maillard signs the checks. It's a great bit. It's mean in the way this show is good at being mean, where the joke is that the powerful person isn't even doing it deliberately. He genuinely can't be bothered. He finally gets it right in an episode called Benson Be Gone, after Benson comes and rescues him from a demon named Susan that Maillard had hired to replace him, which is, I think, a reasonable threshold for learning someone's name. And that's who Maillard is for most of the show. A short, wrinkled, greenish old man with a pipe and a gold-tipped cane, permanently in a foul mood, who shouts at Benson exactly the way Benson shouts at Mordecai and Rigby. He's a bad boss. He's cheap, he's impatient, and he blames Benson for everything the lads break. At one point, he plans to shut the park down, purely because it isn't profitable enough for him. At another point, he has a heart attack during a surprise party and goes into a coma, and then afterwards says going into a coma was something he'd always wanted to do, which is a joke that has genuinely stayed with me for years. He's also Pops' dad, and this is the thing that reorganises him completely once you know it. The reveal comes in an episode called The Ice Tape, and it's simple. Maillard found Pops as a baby on an expedition and adopted him. He wasn't born to him, he was found. And Maillard raised him and kept him safe, and crucially, kept him ignorant, until the time came for him to be told what he actually was. And when he tells him, the thing he makes sure to say is that no matter what any of this means, he always thought of him as his real son. Maillard is also a lollipop man himself, which the show floats past without comment, and which I've never been able to fully resolve. But that's regular show. Some things are just true, and you're not getting a diagram. So, what if the expedition never happens? He doesn't go. Or he goes somewhere else, or he goes on a different day, or he walks past the thing entirely because he's in a mood, which frankly is in character. And nobody finds the baby. There's a version of this where Pops simply doesn't survive, and I don't want to dwell on it because it's a bit grim for 1 a.m. But there's a more interesting version where he does. He grows up somewhere. He grows up unprotected and unraised and unloved at. And what you get is a mega Cranus with all the power and none of the manners, which is more or less just anti-Pops, isn't it? That's what stops me about this one. Pop's naivety was raised into him. It wasn't cosmic, it didn't come with the packaging. The thing that made Pops able to do what he does at the end, the thing that let him hug his brother instead of hitting him, is that a bad-tempered old businessman with a pipe spent decades being kind to him in private while being horrible to everyone else. That's it. That's the variable. The two brothers are made identical in every way that the universe cares about. The only difference between them, the entire difference, is that one of them got picked up, and Maillard eventually tells him. For decades, he just carries it. Once you know that, go back and look at the way he behaves around the park. There's an episode where Pops becomes obsessed with looking at his home planet through a telescope, and Maillard keeps interfering with it, keeps getting in the way, keeps being awkward about it. At the time it reads as him being a killjoy. Afterwards it reads as a man watching his son stare at the thing that's going to take him away and having no idea what to say about it. And then the Spark Initiative happens and he sends the whole park into orbit, which we'll come to, and there's a moment where he cries because he's just worked out he might not see him again. And he's right, he doesn't. The park comes back after 3 years and Pops isn't on it, and Maillard stands there and sheds one tear and goes to the funeral. Then, in the time skip, he dies, quietly, off-screen, before the reunion, and they put a statue of him up next to the statue of Pops. The old man who couldn't remember his manager's name gets a statue next to the son he found in the snow. I think that's the most affecting thing in the epilogue, and it's given about 4 seconds. Fun detail, and this one is a bit sad. Maillard was voiced by David Ogden Stiers, who was an absolute veteran, decades of work, and this was his final recurring voice role. He died in March 2018, a bit over a year after the finale aired, so the last thing that voice does in the show is grieve. And the bit that gets me, honestly, is the beanbag gag, because it never stops being funny. It's still funny now, but it's a different kind of funny once you know that the man doing it is the only reason existence continued, and that he did it by accident, on an expedition, ages before any of this, and then never said a word about it to Pops or the others. He wasn't protecting a weapon. He'd have told someone if it was a weapon. He was just being a dad about it, badly, in the only register he had available. The man can actually play. That's the thing people forget about Benson. He's a gumball machine with a temper and a clipboard, and he is genuinely an extremely good drummer. Not good for a cartoon character. Good. There's an episode called 150 Piece Kit that exists more or less to establish this. And when he gets behind a kit, the show's whole texture changes. The animation goes different. The music takes over. And you're watching a bloke who is obviously, unmistakably, in the wrong job. And he never mentions it. That's what does me in. He doesn't bring it up at parties, he doesn't get wistful. He's just got this enormous ability sat in a drawer somewhere while he goes around the park shouting at 2 lads about leaves. Now, the temper. There's an episode called Think Positive, and it does something I still find quite bold for a Cartoon Network comedy at 4:30 in the afternoon. It explains him. Benson's family shouted, all the time. That was the environment. And his father sat him down and told him that he would not get anything in his life if he did not yell for it. That's the lesson. That's what he was raised with, yell or go without. So the joke, the whole joke, the guy who explodes at the slightest provocation and turns red and starts vibrating, isn't a personality quirk. It's a coping mechanism he was handed by his dad and has never once been given a reason to put down. He's not angry, he's frightened, permanently, that if he stops shouting the whole thing falls apart. And the tragedy of the park is that he's completely correct. If Benson stops shouting, Mordecai and Rigby will play video games until the sun explodes. It's one of the few traits in this entire show with a stated origin, actually. Most of the cast just are what they are. Muscle Man is Muscle Man. Pops is Pops. Benson gets an explanation, and the explanation is a bad childhood. So, what if he gets the gig? Some band picks him up in his 20s, he tours, he's good enough, we've seen he's good enough. And he never applies to manage a park, and never puts an advert in the paper for 2 groundskeepers, and never spends a decade of his life being called ball bucket by a man with a pipe. The obvious loss is that there's no one to hire Mordecai and Rigby, which we've already been round once tonight, so I won't do the whole thing again. Different door, same building. The less obvious thing is what Benson loses. Because here's what I keep landing on. The park is not a place anyone aims for. Nobody is at that park on purpose. Skips is there because he's been alive for ages and needed something to do. Pops is there because he lives there. Muscle Man is there because it's a job. And there's a golf cart. Mordecai and Rigby are there because of a forged letter. It's a collection of people who ended up somewhere. And the entire emotional engine of the show is that they were dumped in the same field by accident and became a family about it anyway. And Benson is the one who ended up there hardest. He's the one with the actual talent and the actual alternate life that he could see from where he was standing. And he stayed. And now the epilogue, which I think is quietly the funniest ending anyone gets. After everything, after the domes and the space and the cosmic brothers and the erasing, Benson goes back to the park. He carries on managing it. That's what he does. Everyone else scatters. Mordecai goes off to be an artist. Rigby moves in with Eileen. Fives goes off to be a DJ. Muscle Man goes off to raise an army of children. Benson stays. He marries one of the dome scientists. Her name's Pam. He's got his pig, Applesauce, who he was reunited with the moment the park landed, which I think is a lovely little detail. Because of all the things you'd miss up there, obviously it's the pig. He's got 4 cats. And he's got his hair back. That's the bit. In the time skip, Benson has hair. I have no idea what that means for a gumball machine. I have never known what that means. It doesn't have to mean anything. It's just the show quietly awarding him something. And it's such a small mercy. And it's played completely straight. And I love it. So what does he actually lose in the drummer timeline? Tour buses. Applause. A life he'd have been good at. And what does he lose in the timeline we got? Well, he did play professionally. Not anymore. But he did play for a living. But he's got Pam, and a pig, and 4 cats, and a park he saved, and a job he's good at, and a set of colleagues who, when the universe was ending, all showed up. I'm genuinely not sure which one's better. That's not me being coy, I mean it. There's a version of this where the drummer timeline is obviously the correct answer, and the park is a tragedy. And there's a version where the drummer timeline is a bloke in his 40s, in a van at 3 a.m, wondering where everyone went. The show doesn't tell you which, it just gives him the hair back and moves on. The coffee shop. That's the whole atmosphere of early regular show for me. Not the park, the coffee shop. 2 lads who cannot afford to be there sitting at a table, ordering the cheapest possible thing, staying for 2 hours, because a robin named Margaret works behind the counter, and Mordecai has decided that this is his life now. And he never says anything. For 4 seasons, 4, he is, by an enormous margin, the most cowardly protagonist in animation. And the show knows it. And the show is not on his side about it. Every time he nearly gets there, something happens. Every time something happens, he treats it as evidence that he shouldn't have tried. And Rigby, who has never had a useful thought in his life, spends 4 years telling him to just say it, mate, which is genuinely the correct advice and which Mordecai ignores every single time. Then she goes to college, she gets in somewhere far away, and she goes, and Mordecai is left standing there, having spent 4 years not saying a sentence that would have taken 9 seconds. And that's when the show does the thing that a lot of people have never forgiven it for. CJ Cloud Girl, genuinely great character, genuinely well drawn, genuinely good with him, and the show puts them together, and it works and it's nice. And then Margaret comes back. She's a news reporter now, and what follows is roughly a season and a half of a love triangle that I'm going to be honest with you about. It's the worst stretch of the programme. I don't think that's controversial. I think most people who like this show would tell you the same. It's not that it's badly made, it's that it's exhausting, and it makes Mordecai deeply unlikable in a way the show doesn't seem entirely aware of. He is dithering. He is dithering at two women extensively for hours of television, and the whole time you're sat there thinking, mate, you had 4 years to say one thing and you didn't, and now you've got two people's feelings in your hands, and you're still not saying anything. It goes off a cliff at Muscleman's wedding. There's an episode called Merry Christmas Mordecai, where CJ sees him, and Margaret accidentally kiss and drives off, and then Sad Sax gets them back together, and then 1000th chopper flight party, where CJ ruins it herself, and then finally dumped at the altar, where it's over. Properly over. And they never speak again. Ever. Not once. CJ isn't in the finale at all. Everyone comes back for the last fight. Every character you've ever seen. Death's there. The baby ducks are there. Party horse is there. And CJ is not. She doesn't even turn up to welcome Eileen home, which Margaret does. Word of God on this is that CJ cut ties with the entire group. Not just Mordecai, all of them. She was done. Which is, honestly, the most realistic consequence in the show. That's what actually happens. You don't get a scene, you just stop being invited to things. So, what if he'd just done it? Season 4, Margaret's about to leave. He says it. She stays or she goes and they do it properly, and the two of them are together. And that's that. And the answer is that you lose the show's actual thesis, which is the least tidy thing about it, and the reason I still think about it. Because Mordecai does not end up with Margaret. And he does not end up with CJ. He ends up with a bat. In the epilogue, Mordecai is an artist, which is what he was always meant to be. And he's married to a woman who is a bat, who has no name given, who has no lines, who has never appeared in the show before that moment. And they have 3 kids, and by all appearances, he's completely happy. People hated this. People still hate it. I've read a genuinely astonishing amount of anger about a character with no dialogue, and I think it's the truest thing the show ever did. Because that's how it goes, isn't it? You spend your entire 20s on a person, or on 2 people, or on the idea of a person. You build a whole interior architecture around it. It is, for years, the main thing about you. And then it doesn't happen, and time passes, and you meet someone at a thing, and they're lovely, and that's your life. And she doesn't get a big introduction because she doesn't need one. That's the point. The person you actually end up with does not arrive with the fanfare of the person you spent 4 seasons pining over. They just turn up. The pining was never about them. It was about you being 23. The version of your life you spent years chasing is almost never the one you get. And the one you get is usually fine, better than fine, just not narratively satisfying, because real life isn't structured, it's just sequential. Here's a detail I love. Nobody in that epilogue speaks. The Batwoman doesn't speak. None of the kids speak. Not Mordecai's, not Rigby's, not Muscleman's, not Five's. There's an entire generation of characters in the last 10 minutes of this programme, and not one of them has a line. They're just there, in the background, being had. Which is exactly how children work when you're watching someone else's life go past at speed. And the last twist of the knife. CJ becomes a muse for Mordecai's art after he leaves the park. She's not in his life, she's in his paintings, which is such a specific and quietly devastating thing to do to a character, and it's about 4 words on a wiki, and I think about it constantly. He got the career, he got the family, and the woman he wrecked things with is a recurring image in the work. That's not a happy ending or a sad one. That's just what people are like. Right, let's flip the first one over. Not the forgery this time. Forget the letter, we've done the letter. The other side of it. What if the envelope with Rigby's name on it had said yes? Both of them go. That's it. That's the whole scenario. And what you get, immediately, is a completely different program. Regular show becomes a university show. Two lads in a hall of residence not doing their coursework instead of two lads in a park not doing their jobs, which sounds like a lateral move and absolutely isn't. Because the entire comic engine of this show is that they are employed. There's a boss, there's a wage, there's a man with a clipboard who can end them. Strip that out, and they're just two students, and students not doing work isn't funny. It's Tuesday. The park needs them to be trapped. That's the joke. They can't leave. They've got no other options. They've got no qualifications, and the golf cart is the best thing that has ever happened to either of them. Give Rigby a degree, and you've given away the premise. But the thing I actually want to talk about is what it does to Rigby specifically, because his entire arc is downstream of that envelope. He's a dropout. That's established early, and it sits on him. And then season 7 happens, and there's a whole run where he goes back and finishes high school, culminating in Rigby's graduation day special. And he actually does it. He graduates. At whatever age he is by then, mid-20s at least, this bloke walks across a stage and gets a piece of paper, and he never ever shuts up about it. That's the joke for the rest of the series. Rigby has a high school diploma, and he will find a way to mention it. He'll bring it up in space. He'll bring it up during the apocalypse. There is no situation so cosmically dire that Rigby will not find a moment to remind you that actually he finished school. And I love him for it, genuinely, without a trace of irony. Because look at what that is. His whole arc is him retroactively, slowly, painfully earning the thing he faked. He forged a document about education and then spent the back half of the show doing the real version. Nobody in the programme ever points this out. It's not a speech, it's just structurally what's happened. If he'd got into college university at 18, none of that exists. He's just a bloke with a degree who never had to prove anything to himself. And the proudest moment of his life never happens because it was never in doubt. Which is a bit grim actually, when you put it like that. The best thing that ever happened to Rigby is that he wasn't good enough. Now I do want to be fair to the show here and flag something, because the timeline on all this is a bit of a shambles and I find that funny rather than annoying. In the film, both of them end up expelled from that high school for blowing up the lab, but Mordecai's got a diploma and Rigby's a dropout, so presumably they transferred, or Mordecai had the credits already. Nobody's ever explained it. There's also a line implying they were seniors about 6 years and 4 months before the film, which would make them roughly 23 or 24, except they were 23 in season 1, and several years have definitely passed since then. The maths does not work. It has never worked. It is not going to work. This is a show where an immortal Yeti's flashback to the 1850s has a Depeche Mode track in it, so I'm not going to start filing complaints about a birthday. And here's the detail that I think justifies the whole thing. 25 years later, the reunion. Everyone's old, Mordecai's got glasses and a beard. They're all standing around in a park talking about how long it's been and how they wish Pops could have seen it. And Rigby's first proper instinct in that moment, after all of it, is to ask whether the old video games are still in the shed. Not the diploma, not the space station, not the fight for existence, the games, in the shed. He says they should go and check for old Cart's sake, and the two of them do the noise. The same noise as season 1, decades on, both of them grey. That's the man. He was never going to be a college university graduate. He was always going to be the bloke checking the shed. They put a dome over the park and shot it into orbit. I want to just leave that sentence sitting there for a second because I don't think people appreciate how mad it is. This is a slacker comedy. The premise is lawn maintenance. And in season 7 they build a dome over the entire park. And then they launch the park with everyone inside it into space. Not a dream sequence, not a Halloween special, the actual plot. Season 8 is called Regular Show in Space, and it mostly takes place up there. And they're stuck for 3 years. The build-up is spread out and it's quite well done, actually. There's the dome experiment, where a dome goes over the park for a month. and there are scientists studying them. And Dr. Langer later helps put the dome on the park for the second time. Then the dome goes away. Then there's an episode called The Button, where it comes back and everyone's confused all over again. And the whole time, Maillard is behind it. And the whole time, he's being cagey about why. It's called the Spark Initiative. And once it goes up, there are news reports on Earth saying that other places have been domed and jettisoned too, and that Maillard has been implicated in a conspiracy. He goes on live telly and refuses to comment, which, given what we've already established about him, reads completely differently on a rewatch. Because it's not a conspiracy, it's a lift. He's driving his son to his appointment. Up there they find the Space Tree, which is a station run by Colonel Rawls, and it turns out the park has been part of a program training park workers to go on missions in space, which is the sort of sentence this show can produce with a straight face. Benson wants no part of it. Benson wants to go home. Benson is, as ever, the only reasonable person in the building. There's Chance Sawshot and Toothpick Sally and Recap Robot, who are Rawls' lot, and they're all good fun, and Rawls himself gets a proper moment at the end where he gets everyone out of the hangar and then stays behind himself. And it's up there that Pops finds out what he is. That's the whole point of the exercise. Earth was never going to tell him. He had to be taken out to the actual scale of the thing before anyone could explain it to him, and then handed over to a bloke called Earl to be trained, which involves Earl making him do chores until he snaps, which is a genuinely brilliant way to test whether the embodiment of good has a temper in him. So, what if none of it happens? No dome, no Spark Initiative. Maillard keeps his mouth shut, and his son at home, and lets him carry on being a delightful man in a park who occasionally looks at a telescope. Season 7 ends, and Season 8 is just more episodes about the golf cart. Which sounds nice. It sounds like the show a lot of people wanted, honestly, because Season 8 is the most divisive stretch of the whole thing, and plenty of people checked out when the park left the ground. And Anti-Pop still comes to Earth, because he was always going to. That's the bit nobody thinks about. He was always coming. The cycle doesn't care about the postcode. He turns up on Earth, and Pops has no idea what he is, has never met Earl, has never trained, has never seen the tapestries, and has no idea that hitting his brother is the loop. So Pops hits him. Because why wouldn't he? And that's the reset, same as it's always been, billions of times, and nobody would ever have known it happened. Maillard sent the park to space to save existence, and he couldn't say so. Not to the press, not to Benson, not to his son until the last possible moment. He just kept quietly pushing the whole thing towards closure, while everyone thought he was being a weird old man about property development. I'll defend Season 8, by the way. Not aggressively, but I will. Yes, it's the strangest the show ever got. Yes, it loses the coffee shop and the park and the whole texture that people fell in love with. Ratings dropped off a cliff, and I understand why, but it's also where every joke from the previous 7 years gets its money back. Every daft character you'd forgotten about turns up. The Blu-rays turn out to matter. Death turns out to matter. Party Horse turns out to matter. You cannot get the finale without the space season, and the finale is one of the best endings in television. So I'm afraid the space season is load-bearing, whether we like it or not. Fun detail, and this is a proper piece of long-game planning. The Space Tree and the Spark Initiative both appear in the film, in the background, in 2015. Before Season 8 existed, there's a shot in the movie's future timeline where you can see the Spark Initiative still going, which quietly tells you that no matter what happened with Mr. Ross and the Timonado, the park was always going up. They knew. They'd known for ages. They just let it sit in the corner of a frame for a year and a half. I'll probably do a whole video on just the space season at some point, because there's a lot in there I've had to skate past tonight, and it deserves better than a paragraph. You know who else? That's the format. That's it. Muscleman's entire comedic contribution to this programme for several years is a botched Yo Mama joke that isn't a yo mama joke, because instead of insulting your mum, he insults his own, and then takes his shirt off and swings it around his head. You know who else likes leaves? My mum. It shouldn't work. It's a bad joke told badly by a horrible man. And the reason it works is entirely down to commitment and repetition, and the fact that High Five Ghost is the only person on earth who finds it funny, every time, without fail, which is somehow more of a character bit than anything Muscle Man himself does. And the show runs that joke for years before it lets it mean anything. His name's Mitch Sorenstein. He's a green bloke of about 5'8", and he's rude, and he's egotistical, and he pranks people constantly, and he calls himself the master prank caller, and by every conventional measure of the show, he's the least deserving person there. And then Starla. I'm not going to do the whole plot because you know it and because it doesn't need it. Muscle Woman is where she turns up. The end of Muscle Man is where he proposes. Dumped at the altar is the wedding, which is also, incidentally, where Mordecai's entire romantic life detonates in the background, which is a very funny bit of scheduling. And the two of them are, throughout, completely and unembarrassedly mad about each other. So, what if she never happens? Muscle Man stays exactly as he is at the start. A bloke in a trailer with a lawn chair and a vest and a joke about his mum, who peaked at some point before the series began, and who will still be doing the joke in 30 years, and who will be doing it alone. Which is quite bleak. That's a genuinely sad character, that. There's a version of Muscle Man that's just loneliness with a shirt off. Instead, here's what happens to him. He goes off to space, comes back, and Starla's there, and so is a child. He's a father. He didn't know. He's been in orbit fighting a cosmic entity, and he's come home to find he's a dad. And then, in the time skip, they have 6 more. 7 children, all of whom, and this is the show's parting gift, inherit his habits. All of them. There's a shot of an entire family of small green people with his exact energy, and I cannot express how much I enjoy the idea of that. That's not a punishment. That's a dynasty. The most obnoxious character in the show has the most conventional life and the most uncomplicated success. He's the only one who ends the series with a straightforward win. Mordecai's got the artist thing, but it's tangled up in 20 years of his own nonsense. Rigby had to earn his way out of a hole he dug himself. Benson stayed in the job he could have left. Skips is still Skips. Muscle Man just wanted a wife and some kids and a lawn, and he got a wife and 7 kids and a whole park, and he never had to change a single thing about himself to get it. I find that quietly hilarious and also weirdly correct, because we all know a muscle man. Everyone knows a muscle man. And the muscle men of this world are statistically doing absolutely fine. They're not agonising. They've never agonised. They found someone who thinks they're great, and they got on with it while the rest of us were sat in a coffee shop for 4 years, not saying anything. Here's the fun detail, and it's a lovely bit of misdirection. In the end of Muscle Man, Death shows up. And obviously, everyone panics. Death has previous. Death has tried to take Muscle Man's soul before, more than once. And now the episode's called The End of Muscle Man, and here comes Death. So the whole crew goes into crisis mode. He's there to deliver a ring. That's it. He's got the ring for the proposal. He's not there for a soul. He's doing a favour. The Grim Reaper is running an errand for a green bloke who tells jokes about his mother, and everyone's screaming, and he's just standing there with the ring. Which brings us to Death, who honestly deserves his own section, and is about to get one. Death in this show is voiced by Julian Holloway. Not inspired by, not a nod to. He is based on Lemmy from Motorhead. The accent's there, the look's there, the 2 large moles on his left cheek are there. Somebody at Cartoon Network Studios sat in a room and said, "Right, the personification of mortality, what's he like?" And somebody else said Motorhead, and everyone went, "Yeah, all right." And nobody in the show ever mentions it. That's the part I appreciate. Death turns up looking exactly like the bassist from Motorhead, and the characters just deal with him as Death. No one says hang on, no one clocks it. He's simply what Death looks like in this universe, and you're expected to move on. His debut is Over the Top, which opens with Rigby dying, which is a bold way to start an episode. Arm wrestling. Skips kills him. In Over the Top, Skips beats Rigby at arm wrestling, causing Rigby's death, and Skips arm wrestles Death to restore Rigby. And he's got a whole thing. There's a Death Kwon Do move called the Death Punch. There's a house. He shows up at parties, because that's the running joke that develops over the years. Death keeps trying to take Muscle Man's soul and keeps not managing it. There's Dead at 8, where Mordecai and Rigby have to babysit his kid, or he takes Muscle Man. There actually isn't an episode titled Last Meal. There's Skip Strikes, where he goes for everyone's souls at once, which is ambitious of him. And then he just sort of becomes a mate. He's on the good side in Exit 9B, fighting alongside the park crew against a load of resurrected villains. He turns up in Cheer Up Pops at a party because they invited him, and he tells them they can count on him for the final battle. And then in the actual final battle, there he is. Death on the roster, alongside the baby ducks and party horse, and a recap robot fighting for the survival of everything. Also, and I want to make sure this lands properly, Death has a son called Thomas, who is a 300-year-old demon and who can talk, and Death does not know that he can talk. 300 years. Death has been a father for 3 centuries and has never once heard his child speak, because the child has simply not mentioned it. That's not a plot. That's a fact the show drops and then leaves on the floor. There's no episode about it, it's just true. So, what if he'd ever actually won one? What if Rigby stayed dead? Rigby dies 4 times in this series, by the way. 4. The arm wrestling. Snowball is the dog, Mordecai pushing him into the space-time continuum, which was an accident, but only barely. And the egg coma one. The egg one's the big one. Excellent. Rigby's allergic to eggs, and he tries to eat a 12-egg omelette to win a trucker hat, and he goes into a coma. That's the plot. A man nearly dies of a hat. That episode won the Emmy. Short Format Animation, 2012. Of all the episodes in this show, of all the cosmic finales and immortal backstories and years of work, the one that took the trophy is the one where Rigby eats too many eggs and Mordecai has to eat a massive omelette to win him a hat. Anyway, what if one of them sticks? The show becomes unwatchable, is the honest answer. Not because of grief, but because Death having stakes changes what he is. The reason Death can be a friend in this universe is precisely that he has no teeth. He's a bloke with a job who keeps not getting it done, and everyone knows it, and he knows they know it. He's not a threat, he's a colleague. The moment he actually collects, he's not a character anymore. He's a consequence, and consequences can't come to your party. That's the trade the show makes deliberately. It hands over all of Death's menace in exchange for being able to have him in the room, and then it cashes that in at the very end, because when the universe is genuinely, finally on the line, Death is standing there, and it means something precisely because he's been useless for 7 years. The Reaper who never managed to take anyone shows up to stop everyone being taken. You can only do that if you've spent the whole show letting him lose. I genuinely appreciate that, actually. A lot of shows would have kept him scary. This one looked at the personification of Death, went, no, he's all right, he's got a kid, and gave him a spot on the team sheet. Since we're on the topic of things that almost didn't happen at all, a newspaper advert. That's the inciting incident of this entire cosmology. Not a prophecy, not a chosen one. A small ad in a local paper, placed by a stressed gumball machine, seeking 2 groundskeepers. It's in the episode First Day, which is season 1, and which is a reworked version of the original 2009 pilot. That pilot, by the way, is a genuinely odd artifact. It was made for a project called the Cartoon Institute, which got scrapped, and it went up on the Cartoon Network website in 2009, and then ended up as a bonus feature on the DVD. And the entire plot of it is Mordecai and Rigby playing rock, paper, scissors to decide who has to sit on Pops's old, uncomfortable sofa. That's the seed. That's the first thing anyone ever saw of this world. It's Rick dragging Morty on an interdimensional adventure for Megatree seeds. And season 1, when it turns up properly in September 2010, is 12 episodes of exactly that energy. Standalone, no continuity, no arcs, nothing carrying over. 2 lads, a park, and whatever nonsense happens to be in that week's episode. The power. Just set up the chairs. The unicorns have got to go. It's a show about doing a job badly. So, what if they never answer it? Somebody else does. 2 competent people. Or nobody does. And Benson does it himself. Or he hires temps. Or the park just quietly runs on skips and muscle man. And a lot of overtime. And the park is fine. That's the thing. The park is genuinely fine. Better, probably. Nothing gets destroyed. Nobody summons anything. Benson's blood pressure comes down about 40 points. Pop's potters about, it's a nice park. And then the thing that always happens. And nobody's there for it. Same as ever. Because when it comes down to it, look at what actually saves existence in that final battle. Pops has the power. Skips has the strength. Death has the whole death thing going on. But the move that breaks the cycle, the actual insight, is Pop standing in the Hall of Tapestries, noticing that the fight always starts in the same place. That's not a superpower. That's just a bloke paying attention. And the reason he's there paying attention is that Pops chose to confront his evil counterpart. Though a scared teenager forged a letter and 2 idiots read a newspaper earlier in the season. I'll say the thing plainly once and then leave it. The universe survives because 2 men were too lazy to find better jobs. That's the shape of it. Every cosmic beat in this program is downstream of professional underachievement. And I don't think the show is being clever about that exactly. I think it just genuinely believes it. This is a program made by people who quite clearly like their 20s and did not think their 20s were wasted, even the bits that looked wasted from outside. All that slacking, all that time spent on a golf cart doing nothing in particular, all those hours arguing about a video game, that wasn't the prelude to the important part. That was the part where they became the people who could do the important part. Fun detail on season 1, and it's a strange one. It swears. Not a lot, but noticeably. Season 1 has actual language in it in a way that season 2 dials back, and season 3 eliminates entirely. And from 3 onwards, it never comes back. Meanwhile, the violence goes the other way, and season 2 is the first season with guns in it, which is a genuinely mad trade to make. They took away the swearing and gave everyone firearms. Somewhere there's a standards and practices document that explains this, and I would love to read it. And re-watching season 1 now, knowing where the whole thing lands, is a properly strange experience. There's no foreshadowing. There isn't any. Pops is just a funny man with a big head. Skips is just strong. Benson's just cross. None of it is pointing anywhere, which means either they worked it all out later, which is almost certainly what happened, or the show is quietly making a point that you cannot tell, from inside your own life, which of the people around you is load-bearing. I know which of those readings I prefer at 1:30 in the morning. There's a moment in an episode called Camping Can Be Cool, where the mole girl, with the enormous glasses, is the only reason anybody makes it out of the woods. That's it. That's the moment I'd point at if someone asked me what Eileen is. Because the joke up to that point is that Eileen is Margaret's mate. That's her function. Margaret works at the coffee shop. Eileen works at the coffee shop. Mordecai fancies Margaret, and Eileen is the one who's there. She fancies Rigby. She makes it obvious. She's not coy about it in the slightest, which is refreshing given that the other half of this show is a man being unable to say a sentence for 4 years. And Rigby's response is to be actively unpleasant about it. Not just uninterested, unpleasant. He ignores her, he's rude, he treats her presence as an inconvenience he's been landed with for seasons, and she keeps turning up. Not in a sad way. That's the important bit, and I think the show gets this right in a way a lot of shows wouldn't have. She isn't pining, she's not waiting by a phone, she's just got a fairly clear-eyed view of a bloke she likes who is currently being a prat, and she's decided to wait it out. And in the meantime, she's got her own life, which includes being demonstrably the most capable person in most rooms she's in. Because she's the one who solves things. Repeatedly. She's a studious, academically overachieving woman who is also surprisingly strong, and she's saved that group more than once. And the show keeps quietly demonstrating this, while everyone else is having a crisis. So, what if she'd moved on, which she'd have been perfectly entitled to do? Honestly, if you'd asked me in season 3 whether Eileen should keep bothering with Rigby, I'd have said no, emphatically. He is not being nice to you, and there is no evidence he's going to start, and Rigby ends the series alone. That's the answer. There's no other outcome. There is no second Eileen in this universe. He'd have carried on with Mordecai until Mordecai got married, and then he'd have been the mate who comes round, and that's a whole life that. There are worse ones, but it's a life with a shape you can see from a long way off. Instead, look at what actually happens. He warms up, slowly, over years, badly, and then it turns out in Dumped at the Altar that he's been dating her for months and hasn't told Mordecai, which is such an incredibly Rigby thing to do. He's been quietly happy for months and kept it secret because he wasn't sure how to say it out loud. That's not shame. That's a bloke who's not used to having something good and doesn't want to jinx it by describing it. She joins the main cast in season 8. She goes to space with them. She's there for the end of everything. And in the time skip, she's married to him and they've got 2 daughters. Here's what stops me about her. She's the only character in this show who chose her outcome on purpose. Everybody else got carried. Mordecai got carried by a forged letter into a job, into a cosmic war, into an ending he never picked. Benson got carried into a park. Skips got carried into immortality on the worst day of his life. Pops was made. Anti-Pops was made. Muscle Man just sort of blundered into everything good that ever happened to him. Eileen looked at a situation, made a decision, and then held it for years. Nothing happened to her, she did it. Fun detail. Eileen is basically Minty Lewis in mole form. Lewis was a writer on the show, and she wrote some of the episodes where Eileen has a proper part, often with Kat Morris. So the most quietly competent character in the programme is a self-portrait by one of the people writing it, which explains an enormous amount about why she never has a false note. There's also an episode called The Eileen Plan, where she shows the others a list she'd written of everything she wanted to do before she turned 25, and she treats the whole list as a joke now, which is a very small, very good bit of writing about what it's like to find something you wrote at 19. Rigby did not deserve this. I want to be clear about that. He got a genuinely brilliant person because she decided he was worth the wait, and the show never pretends he earned it. He just got lucky over a long enough period that it stopped looking like luck. A ghost DJing in Prague. That's where he ends up. That is the final destination of the character, with a hand growing out of the top of his head. He moves to the Czech Republic and becomes a successful DJ and has a son, and the show tells you this in about 4 seconds and then moves on to the next person. I want to work backwards from that, because I don't think you can appreciate how funny it is unless you start at the end. High Five Ghost. Fives. We don't know his real name. It's never given in the show. 8 seasons, 244 episodes, and the man's name is a description of the thing on his head. He's a small ghost whose entire deal is that he has a hand up there for high-fiving, and that he is Muscle Man's best mate, and that he laughs at the mum jokes every single time. That's genuinely most of it. He's voiced by Quintel himself, and he's the least developed of the main cast by a distance. Muscle Man gets episodes, Fives gets to be in them, and it runs in the family, which I find delightful. He's got a brother called Low Five Ghost, who is exactly what you're imagining. And he's got a dad, and the dad has a hand where the head should be. The bit is hereditary. Somewhere back in the ghost family tree, there's a founding hand. So, what if Celia never happens? Fives stays the sidekick's sidekick forever. That's an actual role in a friendship group, and everyone reading this knows one. The person who is defined entirely by proximity to a louder person, who is genuinely lovely and genuinely funny, and who nobody would think to invite to something on their own. And the show could easily have left him there. It nearly did. For years, that's what he was. Instead, Prague. The park comes back and Celia's waiting, same as Starla's waiting for Muscle Man. And then, in the time skip, the two of them go to the Czech Republic and become successful DJs together and have a kid. And I cannot overstate how much I love the specificity of that. Not Fives found happiness, not Fives settled down. Prague. DJs. Successful ones. Fives is a DJ, and Celia's his girlfriend. They're a duo. That's the joke, and it's also not a joke. Because think about what the show has actually done here. It's given the least developed main character the most specific ending of anyone. Mordecai's ending is artist married kids, which is a shape. Rigby's is job married kidder, which is a shape. Benson's is still here, which is barely a shape at all. Fives gets a city and a career and a genre. And I think that's on purpose, honestly. I think the specificity is the entire gag. The bloke you never learned anything about turns out to have had a whole rich interior life running the entire time you were watching. And it went somewhere you'd never have guessed, and you don't get to see any of it. You get the postcard, which, if I'm being sincere for a second, is roughly how it works with people you were at work with. You don't find out. You just see, years later, that they're in Prague now, apparently, doing something you'd never have predicted, and you think, well, good for them, and you never learn a single detail beyond that. He never needed developing. That's the thing. Some people are just fine. Fives was fine the whole time. He had a mate he loved, a hand on his head, and a good laugh, and while everyone around him was having a cosmic crisis about their purpose, he was quietly getting on with it. And then he went and DJ'd in Prague. No notes, genuinely. The one thing I'd have liked, and I'll admit this is me being greedy, is the name. 6 years and we never get it. Muscle Man's Mitch Sorenstein. Eileen's Eileen Roberts. Skip's was Walks. Even the ghost's brother has a name of sorts, and his is a joke about a hand. And Fives just stays Fives. Whatever's on his birth certificate is between him and the Czech Republic. He was born Nikolai in Kiev on a very cold winter night. That's the sentence. That's the actual canon backstory of the goat intern who nobody in the park liked. He was abandoned as a baby, found and raised by the Russian state and made into a weapon. Then he was handed to an organisation called the MOMM, which stands for the Ministry of Mental Management, and given a fake identity and sent to America to infiltrate a park. A park. That's the target. Years of training, a whole state apparatus, a fabricated name, all pointed at a small municipal green space in California where 2 blokes are asleep in a golf cart. I love this show. So Thomas turns up in Exit 9B at the start of Season 4, wanting an internship for easy college credits. And for 2.5 seasons, that's who he is. The intern. The one Muscle Man bullies constantly. The one Benson has trouble finding a use for at first. The one who's just sort of there, doing chores, getting pranked, never quite becoming a proper member of anything. There's a running bit where he's seen phoning his mum. Just checking in with his mum. Which is very sweet and completely normal. That was the ministry. He was reporting in every single time. And in the Thanksgiving special, his mum actually shows up. And she's lovely, and it turns out later that she was a robot he was operating. That is such a cruel, brilliant piece of retroactive writing. The show made you watch a man have a nice Thanksgiving with his fake robot mother while he was on a mission to destroy everyone at the table, and it played it completely straight for laughs months in advance. Then the real Thomas happens. Half-hour special season 6. Rigby clocks something's off, tells everyone, and everyone ignores him because he's Rigby. And at the same time, Benson has got a new girlfriend, Natalie, a preschool teacher who he's showing around the park. Natalie is Natalia. She's his handler's other asset. Benson is dating the operation. And the plan, which is my favourite plan in the history of television, is this. Russia and the United States have a treaty that says they will notify each other before certain missile launches. So Russia uproots the park physically and intends to fly it into a missile. Because technically, if you fly the target into the weapon, you haven't fired anything. That's loophole abuse at a geopolitical scale, and I have never recovered from it. But here's the bit that matters. Thomas turns, not because he's a good person underneath, exactly, because of the park. Because he remembered being praised for saving it in Exit 9B and being treated decently when he spent time with them. And he sat there with his orders in his hand and worked out that killing these specific people was not something he'd signed up for. He was just doing his job. That's explicitly the framing. He's not conflicted about Russia. He's not having a crisis of ideology. He's a bloke who was assigned to a place and then accidentally liked the people there. Which is the entire show, isn't it? That's the park in one character. Everyone at that park was sent there by something other than choice, and then turned out to love it. Natalia goes out of a helicopter and gets eaten by a whale. Benson, who she had handcuffed and was actively trying to kill, cries out in horror, because he's Benson, and Thomas has to go. That's the cost. He can never come back. He's on the run permanently, and his last proper episode is Guys' Night 2, where the lads throw him a night out before he disappears to a dam and goes into hiding for good. And at the end of it, once he's made his rendezvous, he sets off a flare that spells out Guys' Night 2 in the sky. Rigby's line when he goes is Das Vidania, Nikolai. You'll always be Thomas to us. So, what if he'd just been an intern? If Thomas is exactly what he appears to be, the whole thing is, a bloke does an internship, is mildly bullied, and leaves. There's no half-hour special. And more importantly, there's no version of the joke where the least significant person in the park turns out to have had the most enormous life going on the entire time. Fun detail, and it explains everything. Quintel said in an interview that the spy thing was not planned. At all. Thomas was just an intern. And then the writer's room noticed that people online kept asking whether Thomas was going to develop into anything. And they decided that yes, actually, there was more to him than anyone knew. So he's a spy, even though the audience wondered if he was anything. His final appearance is a shot of him sat on top of a Russian submarine, watching the park blast into space, raising a drink to his mates. And a letter from Margaret later mentions that he owns a video store in Montreal that only rents out spy films, which is the funniest possible retirement. A man who spent his life undercover now runs a shop where you can only rent films about people who are undercover. He's not hiding, he's curating. Rigby has a younger brother. His name's Don, he's an accountant. He is significantly taller than Rigby, and he is better and more likeable than Rigby in essentially every measurable way. That's the premise of the episode. It's just called Don. And what's good about it is that the show doesn't do the obvious version, where the brother's secretly awful or secretly resentful. Don is genuinely lovely. Everybody adores him. He turns up, and the entire park immediately prefers him to Rigby, openly, to Rigby's face, and Don doesn't even notice he's doing it, because he's not doing it on purpose. He's just nice, and Rigby cannot cope. Obviously, Rigby's whole personality is a defensive structure, and Don walks straight through it by being taller and hugging people. The reveal, and this is the bit that makes the episode, is the childhood flashback. Don, as a kid, was trying to be like Rigby. That's it. He looked up to him. He thought Rigby was the coolest thing going and spent his whole childhood copying him, And the effect of that was to make Rigby completely insane with jealousy, because Don kept doing Rigby's things better than Rigby did them. So Don's excellence is Rigby's fault. He built it, he made his own competition by being someone worth imitating, and then had to watch the imitation overtake him. That's an extremely uncomfortable and extremely real thing to put in a cartoon about a raccoon. The episode also has, I should mention, a sequence where the entire park gets swallowed by green code raining down the screen because Rigby has messed up an audit that Don was doing. Accounting has never looked cooler, and I doubt it will again. So, what if Don was the older one? Which is a small change and does something quite nasty to the whole thing, actually, because Rigby's jealousy only works because Don is younger. The humiliation isn't that Don's better, it's that Don's better and came second. You're supposed to be ahead. That's the deal. You had a head start and he caught you anyway, and then kept going. Flip it and Rigby's just a bloke with an impressive older brother, which is a completely different and much more ordinary condition. You can live with an older brother being better. Everyone does. It's practically the point of them. And you also lose the flashback, because if Don's older, Don isn't copying Rigby. Nobody's ever copied Rigby. Nobody has ever looked at Rigby and thought, I want to be like that. And that, honestly, might be the saddest available version of the character. Because for all his nonsense, Rigby was somebody's whole idea of cool for about a decade. He just didn't notice at the time, and by the time he did, it had turned into the thing he resented most. There's a nice little callback later too. In an episode called Just Friends, Eileen and Rigby go out of town for Don's black belt ceremony, which tells you, in passing, that Don has continued being effortlessly excellent at things while Rigby was fighting a hot dog, and also that Rigby now goes to his brother's things with his girlfriend like an adult. Nobody makes anything of that. It's just a line explaining why two characters aren't in the episode, but it's the entire arc in one sentence. He went, he brought Eileen, he watched his brother get a black belt. That's growth, that. Delivered as scheduling. And I think that's the honest version of how anyone gets over that particular thing, actually. There isn't a conversation. Don sits Rigby down and helps him process his sibling resentment. He just gets slightly less bothered about it every year, until one day he's in a car with his girlfriend on the way to a ceremony, and it doesn't occur to him to mind. You don't resolve it. You just eventually can't be bothered to keep it up. The premise of Exit 9B is that a bunch of the villains, Mordecai and Rigby, have defeated come back, which is a sentence that requires you to sit up slightly and go, hang on, how many is that? The answer is loads. That's the joke. 4 seasons in, and it turns out these two have racked up a body count that would embarrass a proper action franchise, entirely by accident, mostly over video games and food. And they've never once thought about it. Not for a second. They've just been killing things and going home. So the villain of the piece is Garrett Bobby Ferguson Jr. GBF Jr., son of Garrett Bobby Ferguson, the giant floating head from outer space who held a universal record on an arcade game called Broken Bonies, and who exploded in a rage when Mordecai and Rigby beat his high score. That's from an episode called High Score, and the dad's an obvious riff on Billy Mitchell, which, if you know anything about competitive arcade gaming, is very funny indeed. And the son's plan is beautiful. He poses as a contractor. He's going to turn the park into a motorway. Exit 9B and the entire freeway construction is actually the shape of a summoning spell, and when it's complete, it brings back his father and everyone else who died in the park. That's an enormous amount of civil engineering to resurrect your dad. I respect it. And then everybody comes back. Susan, the demon park manager, the hot dogs, the unicorns, all of them. The park is overrun by 4 seasons of consequences. The reason it works is that Exit 9B was the season 4 premiere, and it was designed as a statement. It's a half-hour special. The credits get the extended version of the theme, and it functions as the show saying, right, you've watched 4 years of standalone nonsense. Here's all of it at once. It's the first time the programme really acknowledges its own history, and it's the moment where it stops being a sketch generator and starts being a thing with a past. It's also where Thomas turns up, as an intern, getting easy college credit, standing there quietly taking notes. So, what if the summoning works properly and GBF Jr. wins? The park becomes a motorway. Exit 9B exists. Everybody's dead or scattered, and there's a slip road where the house used to be. Every single one of these ends up in the same place, doesn't it? That's the thing I keep bumping into tonight. You can pull almost any thread in this show, and the end of the universe falls out because the whole structure funnels into one moment on one planet with one decision, and everything before it is just the question of who happens to be standing nearby. The way it actually resolves is very regular show though. They get the villains sent back through the portal, and GBF Jr. goes with them, and the thing that finishes him isn't a punch, it's that his dad shuns him. His father, who he built a motorway to resurrect, is embarrassed by him, and GBF Jr. self-destructs on the spot. He didn't lose the fight, he got told off by his dad and popped. Fun detail. Death is in this one, on the good side, helping the park crew fight off the resurrected villains, which is a slightly awkward look for Death professionally, if you think about it. That's his lot. Those are all his customers, and he's helping put them back. And the Guardians of Eternal Youth show up too, doing the same thing, which means Exit 9B is the first time the show pulls the trick it'll pull at the very end. Everybody you've ever seen, all at once, on the same side. They tested it in season 4, and then did it again 4 years later, for real. Terror Tales of the Park Tick 2 was actually the most watched episode of that season, at just over 3 million viewers, which I mention only because I find it very funny that the most popular episode of the season, with the enormous continuity-defining premiere, was in fact the Halloween one. People know what they like. Mark Hamill auditioned for Pops. That's a real thing that happened. He came in and read for him. And Sam Marin, who ends up voicing Pops and Benson and Muscle Man, came in to read for Skips. They both got it wrong. Neither voice sounded right for the character they'd gone for. So they swapped, and Hamill went off and did Skips, and Marin went off and did Pops, and the whole show clicked into place. I think about this a lot more than is healthy, because the margins on that decision are terrifying. Hamill's Skips, by the way, is not just a gruff voice, it's an impression of Harvey Fierstein. That's the actual reference point. He's doing Harvey Fierstein as an immortal Yeti, and it works so completely that you never once think that's Luke Skywalker, which, given that it is very audibly Mark Hamill when you know to listen for it, is a remarkable bit of work. And in Skips' story, he's got to do the young version as well, Walks, which he does by keeping the same gravel, but pitching it higher and putting a cheeriness in it. Same man, decades earlier, before everything. You can hear the difference between someone who has been alive for a long time and someone who hasn't yet. That's a hard thing to do with just a voice, and he makes it look like nothing. So, what if they don't swap? Hamill does Pops, and I actually think Hamill could do Pops, is the thing. He's got the range, he can do Delighted, he can do Jolly Good Show. He'd be fine, but Marin as Skips is where it breaks, because Marin's whole gift on this show is that he's playing 3 completely different men, and you'd never guess. Benson, Pops and Muscle Man are the same bloke, same throat, the furious gumball machine, the gentle lollipop, and the green pranker who shouts about his mum. One person. That's absurd. That's a genuinely absurd thing to be able to do, and it means that in the finale, when Pops and Anti-Pops are having the argument that decides everything, that's Sam Marin and Robert Englund talking to each other about the fate of the universe, while also, elsewhere in the episode, being both the boss and the idiot. And here's the thing that gets me. If Marin's doing Skips, he's not doing all 3 of those. There aren't enough of him to go round. The casting swap isn't just a nice bit of trivia. It's the reason one man ended up carrying the emotional core, the comic relief, and the antagonist simultaneously. The other bit of this that I find quietly perfect is that Quintel voices Mordecai himself, and High Five Ghost. So the creator is playing his own protagonist, and also the character who has no name and no backstory, and just laughs at his mate's jokes. Make of that what you will. I've made quite a lot of it personally, at various hours of the night. There's a genuine argument that this show is held together by about 4 people doing an enormous number of voices, and that the reason it feels so consistent across 8 years is that there was almost nobody else in the room. One more thing on casting, because it's a mad one. Death is voiced by Julian Holloway. Thomas, the demon son of Death, is voiced by Michael Dorn, who's Worf, Claude Bain's Troy Baker, Mona's Grey DeLisle, Mr. Ross is Jason Mantzoukas, Siede is Linda Cardellini. There are, by some counts, over 1,400 characters in this thing who appear exactly once. 1,400. Somebody sat in a booth and did a single line as Sweaty Dude or Warranty Guy #1 and then went home, and their voice is in there forever. And there are more of those people than there are of almost anything else in the show. That's what a park looks like, I suppose. Loads of people who turn up once and then don't. Pops is older than regular show. I mentioned this earlier with the pencil restaurant, but I want to actually do it properly, because the origin of this program is genuinely strange, and I don't think it gets talked about enough. Quintel was at the California Institute of the Arts, and like everyone at Cal Arts, he made short films. 2 of them matter. The Naive Man from Lollyland in 2005 and 2 in the AM/PM in 2006. And the characters in those shorts are more or less the characters in this show. Pops is in the first one, near enough exactly as you know him, 5 years before the pilot. Benson's from that world. Mordecai's from that world. 3 of the main cast of a Cartoon Network program are lifted out of a student's coursework, which means the Lollipop Man with the cosmic destiny started life as a bloke in a short film about a naive man from a place called Lollyland. The planet was in the title before there was a planet. Then there's the Cartoon Institute. This was a Cartoon Network project, and the idea was good. Give a load of young creators the freedom to make pilots without a load of network interference, and see what sticks. Quintel developed the regular show pilot for it, using his student film characters, and the Cartoon Institute got scrapped. The whole thing binned. The pilot survived because the executives looked at it separately and said yes, and greenlit a first season, and it went out in September 2010 and immediately ranked #1 in its time slot among its key demographic. The premiere pulled just over 2 million viewers. The show was essentially an instant hit rescued from the wreckage of a cancelled experiment. So, what if the Cartoon Institute doesn't get scrapped? Which is the fun version of this one, because it's not no show, it's different show and also a load of other shows. If that program runs as intended, you get a slate of pilots from a load of young creators, and regular show is one of them, and it's competing for attention with a dozen other things instead of being the surviving piece of a failed initiative that somebody happened to look at. Maybe it still gets picked up. Probably, honestly. It was good. But there's a version where it stays a pilot, where the rock, paper, scissors sofa argument is the entire canon, where Pops is forever a character in a student film and a scrapped experiment, and never gets a home planet, and never gets a brother, and never gets a statue. And what I find lovely about this is that it's the same shape as every other What If tonight. A thing survived by accident. Somebody happened to be looking. The Cartoon Institute is the newspaper advert, and the pilot is Mordecai and Rigby answering it. The other detail that I think is worth sitting with, regular show was the first Cartoon Network original series to get a 7th season, and then the first to get an 8th alongside Adventure Time. It held the record for most episodes in Cartoon Network history until Adventure Time overtook it in July 2017, 6 months after it finished. It also picked up 6 Primetime Emmy nominations and the win for Excellent, and Annie nominations and BAFTA Children's nominations. This is a show about 2 blokes not doing their jobs, and it's decorated. Not bad for the leftovers of a cancelled project made from a student film about a naive man from a made-up country. Fun bit to close this one off. There's a production quirk where those 2 CalArts shorts take up one of the production codes in Season 6. So they're just referenced and inspire characters not included in the production numbering. They're in the numbering. Somewhere in the paperwork of this program, the student films are episodes. The show quite literally counts its own origins as part of itself, which, given how the whole thing ends, with a bloke in the afterlife watching tapes of his own life, feels less like an accident and more like a habit. Immortality has a subscription. That's the joke of Free Cake, and it's a genuinely brilliant one. Skips, the ancient yeti, does not simply have eternal youth. He has to renew it. Every year, on his birthday, he has to perform a ceremonial dance for the guardians of eternal youth, and if he doesn't complete it, they take it back. Not gradually, they shake their rattles and he ages rapidly and crumbles to ash, which we know because Rigby interrupts it. That's the episode. Skips is doing his dance in private because obviously he's not going to explain any of this to anybody, and Rigby barges in for entirely Rigby reasons, and the dance stops and Gary goes off to alert the Guardians, and the Guardians turn up and start turning Skips to dust in front of everyone. I love that they don't negotiate. There's no warning shot. The terms of the arrangement are the terms of the arrangement, and the moment they're breached, the enormous babies with the deep voices begin the process, and the 2 lads have to fix it. So, what if Rigby doesn't walk in? Skips finishes his dance. Nobody ever knows he does it. He gets another year, same as he's got every year for a century and a half, and he keeps skipping around the park and never explains a thing to anyone, which is fine. That's the whole point of Skips. He's the bloke who has everything under control and tells you nothing, but here's what you lose. You lose the reveal that it isn't automatic. Because in Free Cake, immortality in this show is first presented as a fact about Skips. He's immortal, that's his deal, moving on. In Free Cake, it's a contract. It has conditions, it has an annual review. He's not a being of eternal power. He's a man with a very long-term arrangement that he has to keep servicing, on his own birthday, in private, forever. And that's what makes his whole situation land properly later. We already covered how he got it and what it cost, so I won't do that again. But the upkeep is the part people forget. Every year, on the day that's supposed to be about him, he has to go and do the dance to keep the thing he never wanted in the first place. That's a horrible birthday, that. There's something else in the episode I like. Rigby doesn't just interrupt out of nowhere. He's Rigby. He barges in on things. That's what he does. Constantly. All series. It's the same instinct that makes him forge a letter and eat 12 eggs and get sprayed by a skunk. Rigby cannot leave a thing alone. And almost every single time, it's a disaster. And about 1 time in 6, it's the reason everyone survives. Reginald, the godlike ex of Gaia, is worth a mention here too, because he turns up in Childrick of Mort, and he keeps being a bit of a nuisance. He's in skip strikes, cheating at bowling, using magic to fix tournaments, summoning meteorites to stop a bowling ball. Quintin Q. Quippinger appears in Quips, where he tells jokes during a game. Quintin Q. Quippinger tells so many jokes during a game that he annoys the other characters. That's the group of babies, the guardians of eternal youth, who grant eternal life. He loses his temper at a party game and cubes a man. Which brings me back round to the thing I said earlier about them being a committee rather than a pantheon. They're not above it. They're in it. They bowl. They get annoyed. They have a bloke on the books whose immortality they'll revoke on a technicality, and they'll do it on his birthday, and they will not feel bad about it. There's a lovely bit of paperwork on this actually. In Skip Strikes, when Reginald turns up, the bowling scoreboard shows GB as the leader's initials, which is Giant Baby. That's what he's credited as. The most powerful being in the park's cosmology is officially, in the records, Giant Baby. And he's cheating at bowling, which is who Skips really answers to. Benson. That's the arrangement. He renews his life once a year, on his birthday, alone, for a bloke who fixes bowling tournaments, and once imprisoned a man in a cube for telling too many jokes. And he's never complained about it once. Not to Mordecai, not to Rigby, not to anyone. He just does the dance and gets on with the grass. At one point, Mylard just decides to close the park. Not for a cosmic reason, not because of a demon or a portal or a prophecy, because it isn't making any money. The episode's called Men in Uniform, and the premise is that the park is not profitable, and Mylard, being a businessman with a pipe and no sentiment about anything, is going to shut it. That's the threat, not the end of the world, a budget decision. And I find that so much more frightening than most of the actual monsters in this show. Because the monsters are survivable. The monsters have a weakness and Skips knows what it is, and by the end of the episode, everything's back to normal and the grass is fine. You cannot punch a profit margin. There's no ancient weapon for a man deciding that a plot of land would be worth more as something else. The way they save it is by making it profitable after a run-in with Huge Head, and it works, and the park stays open. Fine, sorted, but the fact that it was ever on the table is the interesting bit. So, what if he does it? He shuts it. And this is the one where I genuinely don't think it's the end of everything, which is why I wanted to do it, because I've spent most of tonight saying, and then the universe ends. And it's got a bit samey, because Pops doesn't live in a park. Pops lives in a house that happens to be in a park. Mallard owns both. If the park closes, Mallard just moves him. The son goes wherever the dad puts him, and the dad has been putting him places since he found him. What actually dies is the group. Benson goes and manages something else. Skips goes and does whatever Skips does between employments, which is presumably a great many decades of odd jobs. Muscle Man goes off with his trailer. Fives goes with Muscle Man, obviously, and Mordecai and Rigby, with no qualifications and no reference beyond he shouted at us for 6 years, go and get jobs at a shop. And in about 18 months, they'd all still be alive, and none of them would speak to each other. That's the actual loss, not death, drift. The specific, ordinary, entirely unremarkable way that a group of people, who are only ever together because of a shared postcode, stop being a group when the postcode goes. You've all had this. Everyone's had this. There's a set of people you saw every single day for years, who knew everything about you, who you would genuinely have described as your closest friends, and the only thing holding it together was a building. And the building changed, or the job changed, and now you like each other's posts occasionally. And that's the whole relationship. The park is the building. That's what the park is. It's not a place. It's a reason to be in the same room. And the entire cosmic plot of this program is downstream of a group of people who kept being in the same room long enough to become the sort of people who'd show up for each other, which they do. At the end, all of them. And there's a version of this where Mallard shuts the park in season 4 for perfectly sound commercial reasons. And everybody's fine. And everybody's separately fine. And 8 years later, the universe quietly resets. And none of them ever know that they were, once, briefly, the only thing standing between existence and the fabric of a tapestry. I think that's the most realistic bad ending available. Nobody dies. Everyone just gets on with their lives. There's something very funny about Myllard's business sense here, incidentally. This is a man fully prepared to close a park over profitability, who later spends what must be an incomprehensible sum doming that same park and launching it into orbit. The park wasn't worth the upkeep. The park was worth a rocket. That's not inconsistency. That's a bloke who was never actually running a park. which means the thing that saved the group, in the end, was that their landlord had a secret. If Maillard had been what he appeared to be, a tight old man with a pipe and a spreadsheet, he'd have shut it in season 4, and none of them would ever have seen each other again. They were kept together by a lie. They just never found out. The third part of the finale opens with the first episode of the show. Not a callback to it, not a homage, it just plays it. The Power Season 1, Episode 1, September 2010, shot for shot. Same house, same hole in the wall, same 2 blokes, and for about a minute you genuinely think something's gone wrong with the upload. That's the trick, and it's an outrageous thing to do in the last 20 minutes of an 8-year programme. You've just watched Pops get kicked into a portal, and everyone you love get erased, and then the show simply starts again from the beginning, and doesn't tell you it's doing a bit, because it isn't a bit. That's the reset. That's what it looks like from inside. This is what has happened billions of times, and this is why nobody has ever known. Because when the fists collide, the universe restarts, and everyone begins again at the start of their own lives, with no idea that they're on a loop. Rigby's the one who notices first, which is perfect, honestly. Not Mordecai, who's the thoughtful one. Not Skips, who's been alive since the 1850s. Rigby. Because Rigby is the one who is constitutionally incapable of letting a weird feeling go unremarked upon. He gets déjà vu, and he immediately starts going on about it, the way he'd go on about anything. And because he goes on about it, he actually remembers the entire series, all of it coming back. And Mordecai doesn't. Mordecai's just standing there like it's a Tuesday. So Rigby takes him and digs up the Blu-rays. The Blu-rays from Cheer Up Pops. The gang had a set of discs made containing all their adventures because they were trying to cheer Pops up, and they'd buried them. And Rigby digs them up in a rebooted universe and hands them to Mordecai, and Mordecai touches them, and the whole show comes back into his head. I want to be completely clear about what has just happened there. A billion-year cosmic loop, unbroken since before time, maintained by 2 perfectly matched beings punching each other into oblivion over and over while one planet takes notes, was broken because 2 blokes had a boxed set. Physical media. That's the answer. Memory is the only thing that ever broke the cycle, and the memory was stored on a disc in the ground, because the alternative was streaming, and streaming is literally one of the villains. I'm not going to pretend that's subtle. It isn't. There's a character called Streaming who wants to destroy the Disc Masters, and who turns up in the final battle to help anti-Pops, and the universe is saved by a buried Blu-ray. That's a bloke who worked in television in the 2010s making a point. It's still funny though. It's funny, and it's completely sincere at the same time, which is the thing this show could always do, and almost nothing else can. They use Rick's portal gun to jump forward to the battle, and Anti-Pops destroys the power in the process, which is the show tidying up after itself. The power is the first major object introduced in the series, and is destroyed in its own episode. So, what if the discs stay buried? Rigby gets déjà vu and can't place it. Mordecai tells him he's being weird. They fix the hole in the wall. They get on with their lives, again for the however many billionth time, and nobody ever finds out. And in a few decades, Pops and his brother meet in the Colosseum on the same 2 sides they always stand on, and the fists collide. And Lollyland writes it down, and the universe starts again, and somewhere a blue jay and a raccoon play rock, paper, scissors over a sofa, and none of it means anything, because it's all going to happen again, and again, and neither of them will ever know. That's the horror underneath this whole daft show, and it's why I don't think the ending's sentimental. The alternative to remembering isn't tragedy, it's just repetition. Nothing bad happens, nothing happens at all, forever. And the fun detail, the one that makes the whole thing land, is the title. Because the very last shot of the series is Pops, in the afterlife, sat watching a tape. And the tape is labelled regular show. He's watching his mates. That's what he's doing with eternity. He's watching the recording of the life he gave up. And he says, jolly good show. And that's the last line of the programme. So the title was never a description of the genre. It was a video. It's the thing in his hand. The whole series is a tape that a dead man is watching in heaven. And the reason the universe survived is that somebody made a physical copy. The universe was saved by a boxed set. And the boxed set is what he's got left. And he's delighted with it. Antipops is really annoyed. All the time. About everything. That's the thing nobody warns you about. You spend 7 seasons building towards this cosmic antagonist, the embodiment of destruction, the counterweight to all good, and when he finally turns up properly, he is, mostly, a man having a bad afternoon. Look at what actually happens on his way to the fight that ends existence. He's in his ship, he's watching Pops on the radar, and he gets so wound up that he turns round and erases his own chair out of existence, which is such at a specific bitter temper. Then he goes to have a go at one of his pilots, and it turns out that in the course of his strop, he's also erased half the engine, so they're stalled, not damaged. Stalled. The most powerful destructive force in reality is sat in a broken down ship, because he lost his rag at the furniture, so he says he'll take one of the smaller ships. And that goes wrong too. And then there's a bounty hunter, a droid, who mentions offhandedly that he hit a space deer once, and that they're way stronger than you'd think. And Antipops just says, quiet, the way you would to a colleague on a long drive. And at one point he shouts genuinely that this is why he wants to end the stupid universe. That's his motivation, right there, out loud. He's not doing it because he's evil. He's doing it because everything is irritating and nothing works, and his chair's gone, and his engine's gone, and his droid won't stop talking about deer. In the end, he arrives at the fight for all of existence, in what is essentially an Uber. His ship's mostly destroyed, so he and the bounty hunters turn up in a taxi to Lollyland for the apocalypse. I cannot express how much I love that. That's the single funniest choice in the finale, and it's played completely straight. So, what if he'd been the one on the expedition? Mylard's out there, finds a baby, brings it home, raises it, is grumpy at it for decades, while quietly loving it. Except it's Malum Cranus, and I think you get Pops near enough. Because here's the thing about the two of them, and it's the bit the finale is quietly built on. They are not good and evil. They're the same objects with different histories. One of them got picked up and told he was somebody's real son. The other one didn't, and billions of years of not being picked up will make anyone want to erase a chair. The tapestries show you this if you look. There's no moment where Antipops chose it. He was produced. He was made as the counterweight because the universe needed one. And then he was left out there with the memory of every single cycle, going round and round, losing over and over in the only way available to him, which is a draw. Pops gets his memory wiped each time. That's the mechanic. Fresh start, no hatred, no ambition, no grudge, which is exactly why he's able to be so relentlessly, infuriatingly nice. Antipops keeps his. Think about that for a second. Every cycle, one brother wakes up new and delighted, and the other one wakes up remembering all of it. Billions of years of remembering. And every time the new one turns up cheerful, and has no idea why the other one's so cross. Of course he wants it to stop, of course he does. He's the only person in the universe who's been paying attention, and it's driven him completely round the bend. And that's why the hug works, if you want the actual mechanism, rather than the sentiment. It's not that love conquers all, it's that in a billion years of this, nobody has ever been nice to him. Not once. Pops has always come at him fresh and clean and swinging, and this is the first cycle where somebody who knew what he was walked over and held him. He reconsiders. For a couple of seconds, that's all it takes, and that's all it's ever taken, and nobody's ever tried. And when they go into the sun, he shows something. Right at the end, before he's destroyed, Malum Cranus has an expression on. He gets it. Too late, and only just, but he gets it. And notice that Pops doesn't just erase people in the final fight, he does it selectively, deliberately, saving Mordecai and Rigby for last, which is either strategy or, more likely given everything else we've seen of the man, spite. Same guy who erased his own chair. Everybody dies, constantly. The Halloween specials are called Terror Tales of the Park. There are 6 of them across the run, and the format is simple. The characters sit around telling each other scary stories. And in those stories, the cast gets slaughtered in various inventive ways. And then it's fine because it was only a story. It's the oldest trick in the anthology book, and Regular Show absolutely goes for it. Mordecai loses his head in one of Rigby's stories and then carries on talking, briefly, which is the correct amount of commitment to a bit. There's one where the entire cast is simply killed. All of them. Done. And then the framing device comes back and everyone's fine, and someone gets a snack. And they're some of the most popular episodes the show ever made, which I think is a bit funny given how much of the programme is otherwise concerned with cosmic destiny. People turned up in enormous numbers for the one where everyone dies for no reason. The 5th one does something a bit different actually. Benson rents a fortune-telling machine that shows you whatever you wish for, and Benson, Pops, Fives and Rigby each have a go, and each of them sees how their wish would actually pan out, which is a what-if anthology inside a show I've spent 2 hours doing what-ifs about, so I feel obliged to mention it. So, what if they count? What if every Terror Tale is canon, and all of those deaths stuck? The show ends somewhere in season 2, that's the answer. There's nobody left. The park is empty. The grass is very long. But it's the wrong question, and I want to say why because I think this is one of the more interesting things about how this programme handles death. Death does not stick here, not in the specials, and not in the main run either. We've been round the fact that Rigby dies 4 times and comes back 4 times, and that the Reapers are mate. But it goes further than that. Nearly everyone the lads have killed came back at least once. Nearly everyone who's been erased got unerased. Even Pops, who has the one death that's supposed to matter, is watching telly in the afterlife by the end of it, perfectly happy. The only death in this entire show that actually holds is Mona's. That's it. That's the list. A girl in a flashback in the 1800s killed by falling masonry, who does not come back, who is not resurrected, who is not in the afterlife scene, who does not turn up for the final battle, when literally everyone else in the programme does. Many characters you've ever seen show up for that fight. Death's there. The baby ducks are there. Party horse is there. Chance Sure Shot turns up despite having died. And it's explained away as a clone, because this show would rather invent a clone than let someone stay dead. And Mona isn't there, which is either an oversight or it's the show quietly telling you which of its deaths it was ever serious about. I know which one I think it is, and I think Skips knows too, and that's why he's the way he is. The Terror Tales work because they're a holiday from the rules. The rules of this universe are that nothing is permanent, and everyone comes back and the Reaper's on the guest list. So once a year the show takes the rules off and lets everyone die properly, and it's a treat, because it's the only time the stakes are real. And then it puts them back, and the actual programme resumes, in which the only real loss happened before the first episode to somebody you never met, which is the bit I keep coming back to with him. Of everything on Rigby's list of ways to go, the one that came closest to sticking was breakfast. 25 years on, and everyone's old. That's where it leaves you. A park, a reunion, a load of people who used to work together standing about with grey in them. Mordecai's got glasses now, and a beard, which is a very funny thing to do to a cartoon blue jay, and also completely correct. Rigby's saying he can't believe how long it's been. Mordecai says he wishes Pops could have been here to see it, and Rigby says that if it wasn't for him, they wouldn't have this. And then Mordecai asks whether those old video games are still in the shed, and they go and look. Both of them. 2 men in their 50s going to check a shed, doing the noise they've done since 2010. That's the last thing they do. Not a speech, not a monument, although there are 2 of those, sat side by side. An old man and his son. Just the shed. There's a postscript to all this, which I keep meaning to mention and keep getting distracted from. it came back. Regular show. The lost tapes turned up on the 11th of May this year, 9 years after that finale went out. Quintel's back running it. Solia's is back, Marin's back, Mark Hamill's back doing skips, Minty Lewis is back, Janie Haddad-Tompkins is back. 37 episodes ordered, 10 of them out first and 27 more to come. And the thing I find genuinely lovely about it is that it sits inside the original timeline. It's not a reboot, it's not an epilogue, it's not undoing anything. It's just more days at the park from before, with the ending left exactly where it was, in the fan-made concept, regular show, The Lost Tapes, which for a show built on the idea that the universe resets and nobody remembers, is a properly good outcome. They didn't reset it since regular show. The Lost Tapes isn't an official production. They didn't go back and change the fists or save Pops or give Mordecai a different wife, because regular show, The Lost Tapes isn't an official production. They just found some more tape. Anyway, that's the lot. 20-odd what-ifs and none of them happened, and the version we got is the one where a raccoon forged a letter and a lollipop hugged his brother into the sun.